Could St. Louis Cardinals fans actually be envious of the Chicago White Sox this year? One team is tearing it down to the studs, and the other one is trying to climb out of the basement of historical embarrassment. Both fan bases are staring at the rebuild label, but I have to say it looks pretty different from both sides. Welcome back. I'm Scott Plaza, and today we talk Chicago White Sox. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming. Let's get started with Cardinals on My Time.
I've been thinking about this, Mr. Han. If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time?
All right, so before we get started, make sure you like this video and follow along on the Redbird Rundown podcast via Spotify and YouTube. The support lately has been absolutely incredible, so welcome to all our new followers and from all our day ones. We appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Plastastic17 and follow the show at Redbird Rundown 2. Please make sure you don't miss the mainstay Redbird Rundown show every Sunday night with the brothers Matt, Andy, and Jonathan. And keep an eye out for our Random Cardinal of the Week mini-series, which comes out every Friday at noon. But the reason we are here today, I am bringing in Sean Anderson from CHGO White Sox to talk to us Cardinals fans about what it truly means to live through a rebuild and the roller coaster ride that we may not be ready for. So, Sean, thanks for coming on. I've got a first shout out CHGO. We were just talking. I'm in the Chicago area. I grew up on 670, now 104.3 the score. It's just going to take some getting used to. And I know you worked with my favorite score personality, Matt Spiegel, on Hit and Run. But the CHGO all city model you guys have is what we were talking about. Like, I think that's the future and where I hope things are going. Every team gets its own dedicated room to breathe. You got your own shows. But before we hit the field and talk White Sox, tell the folks what's going on at CHGO and what the diehards are getting into over there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, appreciate the plug and thanks for having me on, Scott. Yeah, for the past 4 years now, March 3rd or March 4th of 2026 will be our 4th year anniversary. For pretty much 4 years now, we've been able to provide Chicago with that fan leg of media, something that does feel missed out upon by the score, where it's consistently when you're tuning in, them playing the hits of the Bears. Maybe you get Bulls coverage. Maybe you get Cubs coverage. But for people like me, Sox fans, they're typically not talked about unless they are a playoff team. So we are giving fans that daily coverage or semi-daily coverage of their teams from a Chicago aspect. And All City also is located in Denver, Phoenix, Philly, Dallas. So we're trying to do that there along with Chicago. Chicago has had the most successful so far. So, I think Denver's also been very, very successful. But, Chicago's been doing pretty well. So, we're real proud of what we've been doing here at CHGO. The Bears have obviously taken off to immense heights. But the Blackhawks have had a great fan outpouring this year. And that's another place, too, where, the score rarely talks about the Blackhawks. And if they're talking Blackhawks, they're having Jay Zawaski on, who is our Hawks guy. So, we're trying to get to the true voice of Chicago, or at least the Chicago fan.
And that's actually the way that I started kind of tuning in over there because, like I said, I listened to the score, but I wasn't into the Blackhawks. I mean, it was fun, but then, things got crazy. Was a big Bulls fan, then they're about 4 years too late on that. So like you're saying, they're just not going to talk about them, being my brother's a Cubs fan, so I get to hear the Cubs stuff anyway. But the White Sox stuff is, stuff that, like you said, we don't get to hear about unless it's very good. Or what we've been seeing the last few years is very bad. So you've been in the cellar for a couple of years. I just saw you posted today's video asking if it's possible for the Sox to get out of the cellar. Last 3 years, I believe, have been 100 loss season, including the historical 2024. So kind of why I brought you on, Sean, is to kind of talk that I've been optimistic about the Cardinals rebuild in comparison to the White Sox and definitely Colorado, because when you look at the Cardinals lineup, everyone in the starting lineup is under the age of 28. And we got Alec Burleson coming off a Silver Slugger, Mason Winn and JJ Wetherholt looking like the middle of the future. Ivan Herrera looks like a star in the making. And then I look at the St. Louis Cardinals and I see Major League talent. I don't know if I saw Major League talent taking the field for the White Sox like this last year or previous years.
Well, and that was the thing, too, in 2025 was it was a slow trickle of Major League talent. The first one was Edgar Caro. Then it was Kyle Teal. Then it was Colson Montgomery. Shane Smith, obviously, throughout the all season, had an all-star season and all-star performance. So he was a bright spot as well. But the full talent really wasn't met until one point in July when Teal, Caro, Montgomery, Robert was there, Shane Smith, etc. And then they started winning some games. And then Robert got hurt, and about a good month of baseball was pretty much all the White Sox saw in 2025. But yeah, no, the Cardinals, they're in a very, very tough division, especially with the Pirates seemingly going for it, and put that in quotes. But the Reds are almost a playoff team last year. Obviously, the Brewers and Cubs battle it out. So it's a tougher division than the AL Central, which might make the record look a little bit brutal. But Cardinals fans should have a fairly decent year this year. I mean, I'm interested in trading for Lars Nootbaar, the right fielder. It just seems like it seems like they're trading off everybody else. I don't think they have any interest in Nootbaar. I just more am interested in him personally. But it does seem like the Cardinals are trying to find the next generation of Cardinals, but that seems a lot easier than what the Sox were starting with. I mean, you mentioned a lot of players right there that are fairly decent: Burleson, Winn, Wetherholt. It's a fairly good start right there. Where last year we didn't really have that type of cachet with our players. Obviously, 2024 was nothing like that, and then 2023 we had those players, but they weren't healthy at all. So, I mean, the biggest thing, it seems like, at least looking at Cardinal history, is avoiding 100 losses, and it seems like the team should be able to do that. But yeah, last time you guys lost 100 losses was 1907. That must feel nice.
Oh, yeah. I heard something else happened right around that time that we don't really want to talk about in Chicago, Cardinal land either. That, but anyway, yeah. And it's very interesting that, like, what you bring that up is, like, you bring up the preseason expectations. Can the White Sox get out of last place? Like, that's quite a place to be, where those Cardinals fans are trying to avoid being in last place, even understanding what this rebuild is going to be. But, like, what does it feel like to put those preseason expectations to just be better than last place?
It feels a lot nicer, and the thing is like, they can still be in last place this year. Really, the only reason I talked about them avoiding last place was because of Pablo Lopez's injury. The fact that Lopez is now out, and that Twins rotation got a little bit worse. They might trade Ryan. Buxton and Royce Lewis are question marks. Obviously, very good players, but have dealt with a litany of injury issues. It seems like the White Sox, if they could stay healthy, could possibly, and if the Twins have a terrible year, not be in last place. They seem destined for it, though. I mean, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a team that can easily avoid 90 losses. A best case scenario might be 72 and 90, which still might be last place in an AL Central. That's now, with the Tigers adding Framber, maybe a little bit better, but they're all fairly around the same group. The White Sox are a lot better than what they used to be, so they're a lot closer to that middle of the pack. But they're still a little bit far behind from the Twins, Guardians, Royals, and Tigers. Where the Cardinals, if Skeens gets hurt, the Pirates can easily just be last place. I mean, I hate to say that. Knock on wood, you don't want to see that. But, I mean, there's millions of ways where the Pirates can just fall apart in front of the Cardinals, where I don't really think that's going to happen unless the Twins fall apart in front of the White Sox.
Well, it's quite the cellar they dug themselves out of, but any improvement, I think, is some type of excitement. But before we get into this, the cellar dwelling, I want to talk about some of the happy stuff, or like some other things baseball adjacent. So on my last episode, I was sharing my spring training experiences from my 3 spring trainings in indie ball, and the last one is where I got released for a 57-year-old Rafael Palmeiro because he would sell more tickets than I would. So
Did you really?
Oh, it was, yeah. I posted that the other day, and then the pitching coach who had to release me called me and talked to me for about an hour to talk about that whole situation. So I'm open to get the deep dive into Rafael Palmeiro taking a 26-year-old spot. But so let's keep it light before we keep talking about the cellar. Is there anything cool, fun, and exciting happening at Sox camp, outside of the Murakami Munetaka or Murakata or whatever they wanted to spell on his locker his first day?
They spell Munetaki when it's Munetaka. But yeah, I mean, I don't really want to downplay that because it's very, very unique for the White Sox. The White Sox haven't had a Japanese player since since Tadahito Oguchi in 2005. Shingo Takatsu before Tadahito Oguchi, but it's been pretty much a 20-year drought since the White Sox have been represented by a Japanese player, or they've made a signing of this impact in the Japanese market. So it's big for the franchise, because if we're talking about the rebuild and trying to get away from rebuilding, because they did it in 2016 to 2019, they're now doing it again from 2023 to 2025. If we're trying to get away from rebuilding, we have to become a true, serious Major League Baseball team that can operate at every single part of the world. This is a White Sox team that loved to attack free agency. They weren't cheap in the way, like, they've spent more than most of the AL Central since 2000. However, they've only spent on the Major League team. So they weren't spending in international scouting. They really weren't giving that money assets to the drafting process at all. It was mainly, let's make our 26-man roster as best as it possibly can be, where now Chris Getz has gone in and they've expanded their international scouting from beyond Cuba to where Marco Patti originally had them, to now building a Dominican Republic complex. The Japan signing obviously is noteworthy, but they just were talking about sending scouts to Japan and finally having a scout in Japan. It obviously led to Murakami, which is huge, but even the thought of just getting somebody established overseas and over in Japan was huge for the White Sox organization. So they've just done a lot of I've talked to like undercarriage upgrades, right? Like if you look under the car, like, oh, it looks real sick, but it still looks like a Toyota Corolla. We still got to trick out the interior and the exterior and stuff like that, but the undercarriage is real nice. They've taken care of the undercarriage, which has led to Munetaka Murakami, which is very, very exciting, because now I have something to be like, what will this look like? Rather than 2024. I mean, you shouldn't go into a baseball game saying you're going to lose. I mean, the nature of playing 162 games should be, it's going to come out in the wash every other day. We're going to win one, we're going to lose one. They lost every single effing day. I mean, it was 41 wins. It's fairly hard to fathom losing 121 games, and the fact that they had to build up from that point to a point where we're being excited about a possible future star, or a possible future superstar, international superstar, it is a huge leap. So Munetaka Murakami deserves to be the number one story at Sox training camp, and easily is.
I love that. I thought he was a potential fit for St. Louis, but it's just an awkward time. And that's what brings me to why we're going to talk about this. You do talk about like the under the car, getting that stuff done. That's what we're hearing about in year one of Chaim Bloom being here. Player development is number one, renovating the spring training facility, getting scouts back as opposed to cutting scouts like other teams are doing, investing more in a pitching lab. So we're trying to convince ourselves this is going to be a quick reset. We've cleared the payroll, the veterans are gone. But the White Sox, like you kind of alluded to that. Which rebuild is this? Is this 3.0? Is this 4.0? Is this like now we're rebuild's over? Is this reset? Where are we at after, someone like Lou Bob gets traded?
This, I think, would be the second rebuild. This all started once they fired Rick Hahn in 2023, in August of 2023. So this, I think, would be the second rebuild. They never really rebuilt after 2005. They were always like, fairly competitive. They'd be under 500. They'd be over 500. Close to 80 wins, a little over 80 wins. And then it really came to that 2013 to 2016 stretch where they said, all right, we have to actually change something. So I think that's the signal of the first rebuild. And that rebuild lasts until 2020 when they make the AL Central, or the AL American League wildcard. And possibly could have won the Central in that season with Abreu's MVP. And it felt like we were really untouchable at that point in 2020 with Robert, Jimenez, Moncada, Anderson. Just felt like these guys were indestructible, and they proved to be very, 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 very destructible. And the biggest thing that the White Sox learned was just they didn't have any depth. There wasn't a two-war player like Milwaukee seemingly can find at the drop of a hat to plug in and play if Tim Anderson goes down. You're not only not going to be able to replace Tim Anderson, you're going to play some of the worst baseball players to see Major League Baseball in the past 6 years. Like they had no depth, no backup plan, and that got extremely, extremely exposed in the first rebuild. So I think the biggest thing for the Cardinals is that ability to keep the health of the organization vibrant. It's not just about the major league roster. It's about having talent at AAA, AA, single A. If your guy at AA gets hurt, we don't hate the idea of promoting our guy to single A to fill that spot. It's about having true depth and not having maybe a top heavy organization like St. Louis might have been leaning towards before they make all these trades with Gray, Contreras, etc.
Well, it felt like during that 2023-24 season, we heard about a new hamstring strain every year coming from the Sox camp. Whether it was Eloy doing something athletic and then, hurting himself. I was excited about that. But yeah, it's a bummer how that all came up, because let's talk about this Luis Robert. He was my dream target. We've been talking about a right-handed bat, and Cardinals have been missing this since last offseason. And even when they were flirting around some type of postseason contention around the All-Star break, I was like, they got to trade for Luis Robert. He can play center. He's got that 30-30 potential. The righty power bat, Gold Glove, but now he ends up getting traded to the Mets. You got switch hitter or not, Luis Anel Acuna back in that deal. So do you feel like you did well? But also, what is the Luis Robert era going to be remembered for?
Yeah, well, the Luis Robert Jr. era is always going to be stained. It's a player that had the highest of potential to even the point of when we're trading him, people still could talk themselves into him being that 30-30 player, a player that never seemed broken but never reached their full potential, a player that you can always talk yourself into. There's a video I have saved on my phone of a TikTok feed of this guy's videos all start with the first word if, and you could just keep scrolling and it just says if, scroll,
Mm.
if, scroll, if. And that's just really the summation of Luis Robert Jr.'s career is if he could stay healthy, he could have been great. Or if he was able to, make a little bit more solid contact, not hit balls completely into the dirt, he would be able to be great. If they didn't play him with a broken hand in 2023 and is able to recover, he would have been great. There's a ton of ifs with his career. So his era is going to be just lumped in with that entire first rebuild of just what if, because
Mhm.
there was so much potential with that team. But yeah, I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about trading Luis Robert Jr. I mean, they could have gotten, a true top 100 prospect, and I don't think I would have felt good about the idea of just dumping him for money. I think Chris Getz did a good enough job as a general manager. He was able to get the Mets to take on the full amount of money. He was still able to get two prospects back. At the end of the day, as a White Sox fan, I'm not rooting for Chris Getz to have the best GM trades or go out there and be able to make the best deal. I want him to be able to represent the organization decently, and I think he did with the trade in the current situation. But my true hangup comes well before Chris Getz. It comes to 2020, and why couldn't this player that we saw almost win the Rookie of the Year be able to build and develop? And that just again goes to the first rebuild sucking and losing Rick Hahn and Ken Williams their jobs, right? Like if you are attacking at this with a true player development push, and that is your goal to develop the best players and not just try to get the best athletes. That I think is where you're going to probably have the most success is truly building a baseball organization rather than, oh, well, we got this amazing potential in center field. We have this amazing potential in left field. We have this
Mhm.
amazing potential at shortstop, third base. We just have no idea how to keep them healthy or how to have them progress, right?
Mhm.
Like Tim Anderson had a great peak in 2019, winning the batting title, but it really felt like he was never able to take another step forward. And then once that one skill fell apart,
Mhm.
now he could barely even sign a minor league deal. So it's not great. Trading Luis Robert Jr. is not great. Any team would have been happy to have him, and I wouldn't be shocked if he goes and has his best career year with the Mets. Also, wouldn't be shocked if he plays 25 games. So that's just Luis Robert Jr.
And he came up very quickly. And you said something that happened that we compared to Jordan Walker's. You said he hits the ball hard, but he just hits it into the ground.
Hmm.
Well, Jordan Walker had some of the hardest hit balls in baseball all of last year. They were, I think, four of them were ground outs to short, and one of them was another ground ball single or something like that. But part of it is he came up early, as well, but he was learning position. So, and you're talking about, you're trading, you're trying to rebuild, you're trying to talk about this player development, and it was the right thing. Do you feel like it was the right thing that they needed to do at this time, or do you think there was a little bit more they could have gotten out of Luis Robert Jr.?
No, I mean they should have just traded him at 2023 at this point. I mean
Mhm.
once Chris Getz takes over in August of 2023 and he's coming off the 38 and 30 homer season and stolen base season, he comes into I think the general manager meetings or winter meetings, one of them, and says just flat out, I don't like this team. Well, then start from scratch, trade Luis Robert Jr. because
Mhm.
his value was never higher than 2023. He had X amount of years left on his contract, coming off that 30-30 season, finally played 145 games in his career. Like hindsight says, they should have traded him then. I understand why Getz tried to thread the needle because Ryan Storff put him in a terrible position where he said Chris is going to have us rebuilt faster than anyone else could,
Mhm.
which I don't think has been proven wrong. necessarily because he's done an okay enough job. But if I had to go back hindsight, I think that is his biggest misstep is not trading Robert at his peak value, holding him until 2026 pretty much,
Mhm.
rather than dealing him before the 2024 season. And then somebody else could have dealt with the whole saga of keeping Luis Robert Jr. healthy, or, even if his jettison helped him. I
Mhm.
think maybe the jettison from Chicago can help him, and maybe being around Juan Soto and a pretty good Mets team could give him a consistent floor. Maybe that would have led to greatness for Luis Robert Jr., but it does seem like the biggest misstep for Chris Getz was not trading him in 2023 because they could have gotten so much for him. It
Mhm.
wouldn't have been a question about taking on that money at
Mhm.
that point. I mean, they would have gotten a complete haul for a player like that. So that seems like the biggest mistake, but I also really don't blame him for not doing it because anyone could talk themselves into Luis Robert Jr. being a franchise player. He just
Mhm.
hasn't proven it yet.
Well, the timing of it is interesting because, like you said, now it's too late, and this is something that Cardinals fans have been used to for the past few years. Is we held on to Nolan Arenado too long. Now it got rid of him for a bag of baseballs. But then this year it was Brendan Donovan, and they actually got rid of him at what I see to be his peak value, like you're talking about with Luis Robert Jr. And now the Cardinals have built to having 5 or 6 top 100 prospects in all of baseball, depending on who you listen to, and which outlet you get that from. Did the Sox ever build their farm system in that way? I mean, you hear the Colson Montgomerys, and you brought up Kyle Teal and Edgar Cuero. Like, did they build it in more just number, or did they build it in the actual quality depth at the top, like you were talking about?
They did a lot better of a job drafting, and that started to change around the first rebuild. Mike Shirley has kind of like really changed the way the White Sox have drafted, and that has seemed to be like the biggest change of the White Sox, even pre Chris Getz, was Mike Shirley taking more of a leadership role with the White Sox drafting, and that has led to Colson, Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith. Uh, Billy Carlson's an interesting name. Obviously, has a 80 grade glove, but really hasn't been able to put up consistency with it bat wise. Hasn't even played a professional game just yet. But what they've been able to do is just have a smarter drafts, right? Like they're not only getting players that they think they could sign cheap in the first round, that they also just think that they have a little bit better of knowledge being in the Midwest.
Mhm.
Schultz and Colson both somewhat hiding out in Indiana and Illinois. They were able to, you know, get a first round grade on them, get them to sign fairly lower, and then they were able to be aggressive in like the second, third, all the way to like the 10th rounds. So they've been drafting smarter, which has just made their minor leagues better. And then not only that, I mean, offloading talent to get Teal and Caro fills out the farm system. Uh, but even with those players graduating, looking at 2026, um, the prospect ranking is either, you look at, I think Kylie McDaniel has them at like eighth.
Mhm.
And then one of the other outlets have them at like 22nd team ranking wise. So they they have a lot to prove, but it does seem like it's advancing to where some people are respecting of what the White Sox are able to do. And it seems like they're chasing to create athletes, right? A big thing that they've been talking about is the traject machine, and spending $500,000 on this like state of the art batting cage that can mimic a player's pitching mechanics. And then it also mimics their pitch shapes. So if you want to go in and face Michael King's sinker, you'll
Mhm.
be seeing a video screen of Michael King's delivery. And then once he throws the ball, that's when the pitch gets thrown out and it has the spin,
Wow.
horizontal, vertical movement of Michael King's sinker. So you could go into a cage, and Colson Montgomery says, he can get 3 at bats before he faces Michael King for 3 times. And, now
Mhm.
he's already stepping up to the plate pretty much with 3 at bats under his belt rather than just going in completely cold. So that's been a huge thing for the White Sox that they've touted, at least for their major league players, is that, at home games, they're able to have this machine on hand.
That's amazing. I mean, it reminds me of going to Miller Park, going to Brewers games, and they had like a Jim Abbott guy that kind of did the same thing. It was just a tennis ball that came out of a screen and it looked like
Mm,
him. And this was, 2010.
yeah.
So I can only imagine what it looked like now. But you talked about then the people graduating, and then it looks like the White Sox are trying to fill some holes now. Like instead of just grabbing the talent and just grabbing bodies and grabbing athletes, they went out and signed Austin Hayes, who I have wanted since day one of the offseason. I thought he'd be the perfect piece for the righty bat, the power. But when it came out is that he wanted everyday playing time, and you brought up Lars Nootbaar, but he's injured currently, right? Like, so there was a question mark around what he could do, but the Cardinals think he's going to be healthy, so they couldn't give Hayes that guaranteed playing time. Is that really all that the White Sox could do that you think made it different, or what is Hayes looking to do here in Chicago?
I don't know necessarily what his other offers looked like. So, I mean, part of the way that he could talk himself into it is, oh, they're going to give me everyday playing time,
Mhm,
which I think he'll get a decent amount of the starts. I think there's a obvious platoon of him in left field with Andrew Benintendi, where Benintendi could go against righties and Hayes can go against lefties, but it does seem like they're going to have him have a little bit more of an involved role. So maybe he's in right field against some righties. But I think the relationship with Ryan Fuller also plays into effect with this. If he is going to have a great 1 year season, go back with the hitting coach that was able to unlock you and have allow you
mhm,
to have your All Star year in 2023. And I think the other thing too, Hayes was able to play center field in 2023, and I think the changing park in Camden hurt his ability to play a rangy left field or a rangy right field, a rangy center field. And I think maybe being in a more normal park in guaranteed rate will be able to show him some defensive flexibility. So if he's able to play left, right, and then maybe even like 2 or 3 games in
mhm.
center field, that can show off for his next contract, right? So I think it's part of the MLBPA situation of the impending lockout and that hurting lengths of contracts. But I also think Hayes looks at next year saying, if I have a good year with the White Sox, getting a ton of playing time, maybe I
Mhm.
can show that I can hit righties at like a league average level and then show defensive flexibility. Maybe he's able to secure a 2 or 3 year deal coming out of the White Sox into 2027.
Well, it has to be a, a testament to the White Sox that he'd even consider it after those last 3 years that have been happening here. It's like you just said, like Luis Robert Jr. just said he didn't like the team, but now to be able to convince somebody even in a 1 year deal to that this is the place to be. But it also they had to do the same for Murakami to get him for a 2 year deal. But I like it just seems like an interesting move that what it says like a rebuilding team. Are they really coming out of the rebuild? Are the Reinsdorfs just sick of losing? Or what is it that's going on that like that convinced Murakami to be there, but also convinced the White Sox to make that kind of a deal?
The Murakami one, it seems like it surprised the White Sox. I think Josh Barfield had a comment that they really didn't understand how in play they were for Murakami until 2 days before they set up a meeting with him at like 10 p.m. to talk. And then after that meeting, they were like, oh, wow, we might actually have a real chance for this. So I think part of it is just the first base market in general. The fact that Alonso signed closer to Murakami's deadline along with Schwarber, it just seems like the first baseman market was hurt fairly severely. Um, so I think it was just right place, right time for the White Sox. I don't know if they really convinced him on anything. I think the 2 year deal was definitely alluring because he could hit the market at 28 and still get a 7 year deal and take him to his year 34 contract. So I think part of it was getting back to the free agent market as soon as possible. And then also, I mean, they just had a spot. He's just going to
Mhm,
play every single day. I mean, there's just no reason for them to not play him against lefties. There's no reason for him to not play against righties. I mean, he is easily going to get 1,000 to 12,000 or 1,200 plate appearances with the White Sox over the next 2 years.
mhm.
And if it goes well, those first 600, he's getting traded.
Yeah.
Like, bye bye. Whether it's at the deadline this year or in the offseason next year, it seems like they've fallen themselves into getting a massive asset that can hopefully continue the rebuild. It doesn't seem like this is a rebuild around Murakami in any way. It seems like it's just Murakami fell into their laps and now they have an asset to try to build into something that they can again flip over and keep building.
Now, is that something that is like it's not the highest paid deal in White Sox history. That's still Benintendi, I believe,
Hey,
right?
thank you for
Not
the reminder.
oh, is that hey, I gotta take wins where I can get them this offseason. But do you think that's something where that's the Jerry switching to Ishbia like plan where maybe Ishbia is like not totally bought into this rebuild, like he wants to get out of this thing if his investment's gonna work?
No, I don't think it really has much to do with that. So. The biggest thing that's holding back the Sox, at least from paying significantly, is the fact that they just went for this main rebuild, and they extended Aloy, they extended Robert, they signed Graveman, Hendricks,
Mhm.
Kelly, extended Lynn. They got themselves into a huge mess there, and I think Chris Getz wanted to just walk himself back from the mess. So I think part of it is walking himself back from the mess. They also are no longer on a team at RSN, so they're no longer under NBC Sports Chicago. They have their own TV
Mhm.
programming, which they claim as losses. I don't think they're currently selling the product well. I don't think that they're having the amount of subscriptions that they want. I don't think they're able to pull in the advertising that they want just currently. So I don't think that this has been a fruitful endeavor for them. So I think they're losing money on that aspect. So it's part coming out of the rebuild, and then it's also part of the RSN because you look post pandemic, they are at 141 million in 2021, 194 in 2022, 178 in 2023. Last year, that 121 loss team cost them 153 million.
Yes.
And then last year they were down to 78. So I think part of it is getting clarity from that team. Right now they're only at 85 million, but next year, lockout depending, or even by 2028, I wouldn't be surprised for them to be near that 150 number again.
The RSN was a joke. I mean, I have Comcast, so I was supposed to be ready by the start of the bowl season, and then it was
Yeah.
go to CVS and get an antenna and get it connected on like your tallest ceiling or something. But
And I
um,
love that. I loved the over the air TV. That was free, and I loved it. So I'm surprised they didn't stick with it.
yeah, I mean, as long as you were standing on top of your roof with the thing on top of your head, like that's how I was getting the signal
No,
at least.
we're blocks from the UC, so
Oh,
our picture was fine.
there we go. There we go. Of course, of course. That makes total sense. But last shared connection before we start to wrap this thing up into the year season is that Eric Fetty is back in Chicago. So he revived his career with the White Sox, and you convinced the Dodgers, to give you Miguel Vargas for him. And the Cardinals grabbed Fetty, and his consistency that he was gotten for was consistent losses. But now he is back in Chicago. So welcome back, or what's up?
Yeah, it's just really the state of the White Sox. It's tough to be excited about a fifth starter when you're again projected to at best lose 90 games. So it's mostly a guy that hopefully can eat 100 innings for them, and it's about length. When you look at even their bullpen, like four of their like eight guys can give them length. Newcomb can give them length. Vassell just pitched 100 innings out of the pen. Paez is a Rule 5 pick that was a starter in A-ball. He could probably give you 3 innings if like you need to, maybe behind an opener. I think I already mentioned Newcomb. He's been a past starter. Hicks, who we just got from Boston, former Cardinal as well, former starter. So they at least have the ability to have some length out of their pen. So I think really what they're looking for is just innings. And Eric Fetty, although they might not be the prettiest 6 innings, he can give you 6 innings. And the one thing that at least like made me a little bit more excited, it's a $1.5 million deal. So if it goes terribly wrong and he has the worst 4 starts ever to start 2026, they're just going to cut him. But in his first bullpen session with Brian Bannister, they were talking about how he was getting away from being linear, and he wasn't as linear enough in his mechanics as he wanted. And looking at the pitch graphs for Fetty compared to what he was in the pre-deadline stuff before with the White Sox, he was mainly a cutter pitcher, and that cutter was a little bit sharper. It seemed like it flattened out a little bit. It was like I think 7 on horizontal break, and then it was at like 9, so it's just a little bit more flatter on that end, and then it wasn't getting the same amount of dip as well. I think it was like negative 2.8 compared to like negative 1.2. So it's a solid foot there. I do wonder if they try to get a little bit more sharpness on that cutter, if that's going to allow Fetty to be back per se, but also the sweepers come out of fashion. The sweeper, is losing its effectiveness, and that was a big thing for Fetty going over to the KBO, was honing in on that sweeper. Then coming back in 2024, where it was still like a popular pitch that guys really hadn't figured out yet, but as we get through 2024 and then into 2025, the sweeper's been snuffed out a little bit more, and he started to have less success. So I don't think that's like definitely correlates. I think so. I think that there's a possibility that they can revitalize him again, but nowhere near the point where he's a 3F or getting traded to the Cardinals, right? Like at least for a former top 100 prospect, maybe we get like a late 20 prospect or something, and he's a reliever, but we're not getting anything like the Vargas Edmund swap that also won the Dodgers the World Series. Like
Right.
that trade didn't work out for us. That trade didn't work out for you. It just worked out for the damn Dodgers, and that sucks.
Everything's coming up Dodgers. If any team needs a break, it is the Dodgers, though.
Yeah.
Well, this was like we talk about 1 year deals. There's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal, especially for $1.5 million. And at the end of the day, it's not my money, so I don't care. Do whatever you
Right.
want with it. But the last thing before we head out and wrap this thing up, let's talk about it. Who wins more games? Cardinals or the White Sox? The betting sites have Fangraphs leading towards the Cardinals 68.5 to the Sox 67.5. Pacoda says the Sox are like 72. Pacoda says the Cardinals are 66, but Fangraph has them winning 77 games. So what say Sean?
I'm honestly surprised that St. Louis is projected to be that low at 66 and 95. I guess it's more 66 and 96 there from Pacoda. I'm a White Sox fan, so I'm saying White Sox. If we want to make a wager or a friendly bet, that's fine with me. But yeah, I think especially with our division, and looking at the Pacoda standings too. I mean, they're projecting Minnesota still at 79 and 83. I don't think that that's a team that's trustworthy, a team that will finish near 500. So I think the Sox can do decently against Minnesota. So if there is a team that had to over exceed expectations this year, I think it's Chicago over St. Louis.
Interesting. All right. And that's where I'm obviously I'm a Cardinal colored glasses. I have multiple bets on Cardinals over 70.5 and 69.5, 68.5. It just keeps going down and they just keep getting me taking it. But
Perfect.
I'd be happy to wager a CHGO diehard membership that we could talk about and iron out a little bit later as the season gets closer, if that's something that you guys want to do. Um,
Let's do it.
all right. Beautiful. So we'll get something in writing here and then we'll get something figured out for that.
Who are you most excited for, though? Like, what Cardinal should I be looking out for? I mean, obviously Mason Winn has been pretty decent, and I know the throws are absurd over there. Like, who are you most excited for in 2026?
So Mason Winn should be the face of the Cardinal, whether it's this Cardinals team or the next Cardinal team. I think he should be the future. JJ Wetherholt, they're giving him every opportunity to win it. Top 5 prospect in all of baseball. He's going to be super exciting. But the talk is, what can Ivan Herrera do?
Mm.
I think he has the potential to be a 25-30 homer guy. They're going to put him back behind the plate. There's people that are either get him out from behind the plate, or I'm one that says he provides you maximum value if he can hit 25 homers and play somewhat decent defense. So
Right.
I'm excited to see Ivan Herrera try to stay healthy for 90 to 100 starts behind the dish.
Yeah, and I mean that's the other thing too. At least with catchers, I mean it's obviously a terrible position to play. I can barely make a squat as it is right now. But you at least get like 62 games off, and maybe you're able to at least keep him healthy in that spot. I know he's just a tank though, so I mean he should be fun to watch. And hey, if Jordan Walker could start hitting homers, that should be a fun 1-2 punch. But we'll see.
Oh
Best of
man,
luck. You know,
we made it through almost the whole thing before talking about Jordan Walker. Besides that little bit, that's
yeah, you brought him
automatically
up
going to
though.
get. He's got one option left, and that's the big talk. Is it going to be used? But I mean, I stood next to him. I'm 6'5", 230, and he made me look like an absolute shrimp. He said he was trimming down to 260, which is psychotic.
And
But
also, that guy feels 31. It's crazy that he's only 25, 23 and a half or whatever.
The amount of times I see someone like, how is that dude not my history teacher or whatever?
Right.
It's like, yeah,
I mean, like a grown man when he was like 18. It's just absurd.
yeah,
I could barely reach 5'7", let alone 6'7".
yeah. He is someone I'm excited about, but I try to keep my listeners tuning in, so I try to keep that on the hush. Because like I said, it's a very tough time to be Jordan Walker and in this year for the Cardinals fans. But let's take this thing home. So I don't know if this Cardinals fans made you feel better or worse about 2026, or what's going to happen during this rebuild that we think is going to be short, but Sean's showing us the grass isn't always greener, but there is at least something to be excited about as things come up. So, Sean, thank you for your insight. Before I wrap this thing up, can you tell everyone where they can find you, the CHGO White Sox crew, and what to expect out of you guys?
Absolutely. You can find us on every platform site, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CHGO Sports. I do the CHGO White Sox podcast Monday through Wednesday at 5 p.m. live on the CHGO Sports YouTube channel. So if you are ever into the White Sox, or maybe we have some breaking news, they fire the GM or whatever, I'll be talking about it live on the CHGO Sports YouTube channel. So thank you for having me on, Scott. And yeah, if you ever have a White Soxville, maybe there's a Cardinals White Sox post game show that you need some coverage for, I'm your person.
Absolutely. I'll definitely be in touch with that because we're setting those expectations pretty high, it looks like. So I appreciate you coming on, Sean. Hopefully we'll both be out of the cellar soon. For Sean, I'm Scott Plaza. This was Cardinals on My Time. Thanks for hanging.